And actually, just before we do acknowledgement of country, just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat. We'd love to be able to pick up on those later. So I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the respective lands on which we meet, and we recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, so tonight is really about supporting your child at home with their literacy. So we're going to start with talking about reading. So we want to know, well, why is reading at home important? There's a lot of research out there about children who are read to at home, particularly from a very young age. And so those children who are frequently read to usually have a higher reading skills. When they start school. Boys and girls who are read to more frequently can also get higher NAPLAN scores, usually on the reading test. And children who are read to more frequently at an early age are going to enter school with a larger vocabulary and some advanced comprehension skills, being able to talk about what they've read in a more complex way as well. So really important that we are reading to our children. It's not just something that happens at school, that it is something that continues at home as well. So what is it like to learn to read? It's probably hard to think back to when you first learnt to read yourself, but it's not a natural thing to do. We don't just pick it up through osmosis. It's, we actually have to learn to do it. So when children are looking at a text for the very first time, this sort of squiggles and lines and things like this is what it can look like to them. And it doesn't really make any sense, really. So what we then do is we start to teach them about things like letters. We teach them about sounds. We then start to teach them about words called high frequency words, words that we're going to see quite often in text. And once they start to learn those, once they've had enough exposures to those, they then start to pick them up in text. So as you can see here, that the writing has started to become a little bit more familiar. You can see some sounds that they might know. There's some words that they know, and they're starting to put the pieces together. And we call this decoding. Being able to decode is actually working out what is actually on the page. So once they've started to put those pieces together, it's really vital that children become proficient in recognising those letters and those sounds and the high frequency words so that they can then solve what is on the page. It's really important that, I know some parents get tempted when they're reading to cover the pictures. It's really important that we don't do that. Whilst we don't encourage them to look at the pictures to guess here at Botanic Ridge, they are still an important part of the text, and it helps your child to gain further meaning, but also to check for understanding when they're reading. So if they've read the word hat, but there's clearly a cat on the page, it helps them to work out, oh, actually, I've read that wrong, so I need to fix it. So it's really good to help with that building of meaning. Megan?
All right, so how do we teach children to learn at our school? So we use the simple view of reading to help understand how children learn to read. There's two different parts of the simple view, and that is word recognition. That's all our phonics, it's our high frequency words, that's our phonological awareness, the ability to manipulate sounds within the word. And also we do a heavy reading comprehension, oral comprehension. So every day in foundation and year 1 and year 2 and year 3, we all do read books and we talk about the text. So that's where we explicitly teach different comprehension strategies. So we have just the same amount of each. So what they know is if you have low word recognition skills but high comprehension, you're not going to be a proficient reader, and vice versa. You both have to be good at both. So in foundation, that's what they do. They work just as heavily on their phonics and their high frequency words as they do their oral comprehension. And then we do that through storybooks every day. Talk, always talking about the text and engaging them through talk. So learning to read is very complex. So when you think about what you do when you read and how your brain is working, functioning and thinking all the time, it's making connections, it's using background knowledge. There's a lot to it when they are reading. So we use this to break down how children learn to read. In foundation, they do heavily work in the word recognition and just breaks it down as that high frequency words. We've got our phonological awareness and our decoding, which we do every day. But then we also choose from the language comprehension. We choose areas to work on as well in foundation, and further up the school they go, the less word recognition they do in the class and more just all about language comprehension. So what they know is once they can do both and really, really well, that is when they become a proficient reader. But yeah, there is a lot of complex understanding to all those links when you really have to start thinking like what is actually happening in your brain when you read, like what are you actually thinking about and what is actually happening in the brain. But yeah, we use this to help teachers understand the different sections of what they need to be covering in reading.
So at schools, a lot of schools now are really focused on phonics, and at Botanic Ridge, phonics is something very important to us. So there are a lot of programs out there that different schools use. The one that we have selected at Botanic Ridge is called Sounds Right, and we mostly use Sounds Right just to follow the sequence of sounds that we teach, and the sequence we teach we then align with the books that we send home and things like that. So Sounds Right is just an approach to direct the teaching of phonics. So it really begins with language and the sounds in language, and then moves into the sounds in the written words. So you'll often find that probably in the beginning of foundation, also that we don't tend to talk letter names as often. We tend to more talk sounds because the sound is the more important part. It's the part that's going to actually help them to read. It's the part that's going to help them to write. We'll eventually start to talk more about letter names, but just the sounds are the most important part. So we really believe that if children can read it, they can spell it as well. And so blending and segmenting, so two words that you'll start to hear tonight, and you probably start to hear your kids using them as well. So blending is just being able to put the sounds together to read a word, and segmenting is breaking the word apart so that you would then be able to write the word as well. And we teach them together. So we don't in phonics just focus on reading, we focus on both. And it's really important to know that we don't really move on until children are proficient in being able to read, but also write those sounds, which obviously results in kids being able to read and then spell words at a particular level. So there's a few things that Sounds Right, some conceptual knowledge that really underpins the program. And that's that English speech is written in a visual code where symbols known as spellings or letters are used to represent individual sounds. So they could be one at a time from left to right and across the page. Each sound may be represented by 1, 2, 3, or even 4 letter spellings. It's really important, and this is something that we're already teaching foundation children, is that letters don't actually make a sound. Letters represent a sound. If you hold a letter up, it's not going to talk to you. It represents a sound, and that's the sound that we need them to know. Sounds can be spelt in many, many ways, and you'll find how insane English can be with how many different ways we can spell certain sounds. And that we can have many spellings for more than one sound as well. So with Sounds Right, we follow a scope and sequence. So we teach the sounds in a systematic order. So at the moment, foundation children, we've exposed them to S, A, and T, and we've also looked at I and M so far. And this is the order we follow. We don't deviate from that order. We follow this order. And as children become more proficient, we then move further into it. And as I said before, they need to be proficient in both reading those sounds, but also writing them. We do have children who do have some letter knowledge and sound knowledge already, But before we start moving them on too far, we want to make sure that their written abilities match their reading abilities too. So in Sounds Right, we start with something called the initial code, and that's where we learn just the first single letter sounds. We then start to learn some double letter sounds that we call digraphs, so double F, double L, and it's not towards the end of the year that we actually start to look at some digraphs such as SH, CH, TH. So if you're reading and you think, oh, why don't they know this sound yet? It's probably because we haven't got to it. So they don't just sort of instantly know all of them. We teach them in a systematic way. So after they've worked on the initial code, we then look into the extended code, and this continues all the way through the school. So your child, after foundation, after year 1, will continue to still do phonics each day. And this is where we start to look at more so the spellings and those multiple ways of spelling a particular sound. But also we look at some different sounds because there are 44 sounds in the English language, and we have to try and cover them all so that children are proficient at reading. So I've got a video, and fingers crossed technology works for me today. But I've got a video because I wanted to just talk about how important pronunciation of sounds is. And as we're teaching children sounds, we're making sure that they're pronouncing them correctly. So at home, if you're reading with them and you're helping them with a particular sound, you'll probably pick up at some point that they will actually correct you with certain sounds. There may be some that you think, oh yeah, that's how it sounds, but there's certain ways that we do pronounce them. So hopefully this video works for us, and let's see.
I'm going to give you a quick tour of the sounds of spoken English. There's 44 sounds in spoken English in the dialect I speak. And so let's go through the consonants first, 24 consonants. So there are 3 pairs of stop consonants. You stop the air and you let it go. So there's p and b with your lips, t and d with your tongue behind your teeth, and then k and g in the back of your mouth. Then we have 3 nasal sounds in the same locations. So n, and as in sing and lung in the back of your mouth. Then we have 4 pairs of friction sounds. So there's th as in thigh and th as in thy, which are distinct sounds, but we don't spell them any differently. And then v and s, z, and sh, z, as in vision and treasure and beige. That's a sound from French. And then we have in the back of your mouth, which is a friction sound that's lost its pair. Used to have a pair in Old English, but we don't say that anymore. Then we have 2 sounds that are actually combination sounds. So you're combining stopping and then friction. So there's ch, which is actually made out of t and sh, yeah? And then j is made out of d and j run together. And then we have a couple of semi-vowels, so woo like in wet and y like in yes. And then we have l and are also very vowel-like sounds. So I think that's 24 consonants. Then let's do the vowels. So vowels, we have what we call short vowel. They're not really short or long. They're just, you have to follow them by a consonant. So they're not at the end of an open syllable. They can't be the last sound in a syllable. So there's a as in cat, e as in red, I as in him, o as in hot, a as in cup, and then o as in put or good. All of those have to have a consonant after them. And then we have long vowels, which you can have at the end of a syllable. So there's a as in day, and I as in pie, and e as in see, and o as in go, and u as in do, and then also u as in news. So Americans say news and we say news. And then, so that's 6, am I right in 6? Yes. And then there are some that are sometimes called R-controlled vowels. So R as in car, as in her, or as in saw. And then we have ow as in out, and then oi as in boil, then air and ear. And the final vowel, taking us up to 44, is as in butter, so actor. And it's an unstressed vowel in 2-syllable words usually, or in unstressed words in sentences like the. We say the, and we don't really say the. But when we're learning to spell those words, we overstress them and say them the way that they're spelt. So there you go. If anybody asks you what are the 44 sounds, there they are.
All right, so probably there may have been some sounds in there that might be different from maybe how you were taught, or maybe what you think. So you can always go back to this video. We might even try and make sure this is up on our website. So if you ever want to go back and just check just how to pronounce a particular sound, you can go back and watch this video. All right. Oh, all right. So when we're teaching phonics in particular, there's some terminology that we start to teach children, and they may come home and start talking about this terminology. So I thought I'd add it in just so you have some idea of what it might be about. So phoneme is just the smallest unit of sounds that you can hear in a word. So in the word sit, there are 3 phonemes, it, and you can say them orally. Blending, as I said before, is just putting the sounds together to be able to read a word. Segmenting is being able to break a word up into its individual sounds in order for the word to be written. A digraph is when there are 2 letters that represent one sound. So for an example, the sh, the sh in the word shop. We then have a trigraph, which is 3 letters that represent one sound. So the IGH in the word night is I, so that's a trigraph. You then have a quadgraph, which is obviously 4 letters that represent one sound. So as in the EIGH in the word wait. Then we have another one called a split digraph, and these ones pop up more than you think they do. And this is just when a digraph, so those 2 letters that represent one sound, and they're split by a consonant. So the A and E, like in the word cake. So that's just a little bit of terminology for you.
So that's all the phonics side of things, and then we also, as I said, daily we work on their oral comprehension. So we look at different reading strategies and we teach them explicitly how to do that. And as the years go up through the year levels, this skill gets more complex. So we in foundation we have like fluency, flamingo, and summarizing, sloth, and we introduce it that way. And then they read. So we call it as teachers interactive read alouds, and they teach them. That is daily, so they might be working on summarizing for the term or making connections, or synthesizing. So every term they work on different things, and we slowly build up the skill. We keep building every year and make it more and more complex. So we try and break down, like I said, we break down that comprehension into breakable parts, and then we build from there.
So in terms of school routine, so what is going to happen? How are you going to do reading at home? So children are going to swap their take-home book. So they will receive a book that looks something like this. There's a number on the back and there's a sticker as well. So they're going to bring home a book, and every second day we actually swap our books over. So because the process of actually sounding out words can take a lot of brain power for young children, there's a lot of research about repeated practice of a book actually helps to support something called automaticity. So, so instead of having to think, oh, that sound is s, they just know it, or even just automaticity and knowing those particular high frequency words, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So knowing those, straight away. Is what we want to be practicing. And this is why home reading is so important, that they are getting that repeated practice at home. They'll get repeated practice at school, but really important that they're continuing that work at home too. And when children have automaticity and decoding, they're actually able to use their brain more comprehend what they're actually reading. So if they're spending a lot of time actually trying to sound out every single word and it's becoming really laborious, the chances of them actually comprehending what they read is very, very low. So we want them to be, spend some time doing their decoding, and then taking a bit of that brain power away to focus on their comprehension. So this is what we recommend, that on day one of them bringing home their book, that you just focus on the decoding side, the actual reading of the text, and just discuss the meanings of any new words. There'll be texts that might have something that your child hasn't experienced before, so having that opportunity to talk about those things. On the second day, so they've already read it, it's now slightly familiar to them, they should spend less time focusing on the actual decoding. It should be slightly easier for them. And this is the day that you can actually focus on your comprehension. So that's where we're going to be asking questions about what's happened or making a connection. So if there's a story about a beach, talking about, oh, you remember when we went to the beach that time, and trying to pull out some of those other things in their reading. So some things that are important to know. So there are actually two types of take-home books. There are decodable texts and there are predictable texts. So at Botanic Ridge, in Foundation and most of Year 1, children will just bring home decodable books. And these are books where all of the words, excluding those high frequency words, the words that have some tricky sounds in them, can be solved by simply saying the sounds and reading the word. The other type of text, which children may get later on, those are called predictable texts. And the texts have repetitive phrases, and it's usually changing 1 or 2 words in a page. And we don't have any of those in Foundation. So you won't see a story that goes, I can see a dinosaur, I can see a cat, I can see a rhinoceros, because those sorts of texts rely on children not actually reading the words, but instead just guessing. So we really focus on them actually saying the sounds and reading the words. And we do have some online programs. The online programs that we give you, and any personal libraries that you have at home. These are the books that we suggest that you read to your child. So on the side, you can see there's a table with just a difference between what a decodable text would look like. So the hen, the dog, and the pig sat in the mud. These are all words that can be easily sounded out. Whereas over the other side with the predictable text, you've got a sentence like, this is a small dog, which requires some more complex sounds that children just wouldn't know. And they really just learn those through memory, which is not the way that we teach here. So home reading, so they will get their decodable book, and this means that the sounds in those books have been taught and your child is capable of reading them. As such, students are encouraged to read these books by sounding out the words. And the decodable books are really important because they not only help the child to develop that ability to read, but also supports what we're actually doing in class with our phonics lessons. And you'll find that on the back, they'll have a yellow circle in the top left, and there'll be a box number because we do have different levels of books as they get progressively harder. I'm going to say this, I'm not going to sugarcoat, but box 1, the books are very, very dry. You will read books that say Pip sat, Pip sit, tip, and it will go on, and there's not really much of a story in terms of the text itself. There might be a little bit more of a story in terms of the pictures and the images, but they are a little bit dry to begin with. You sort of, once they progress through, then you'll start to get a little bit more of a story. So it is, yeah, I'm going to say it is a little bit dry to begin with, but as your child gets better at reading, they will progress and you'll get to read something that's a little bit more exciting. So here are some really important tips. The most important one is to set up a daily routine with your child and really think about when is a good time. Often parents think that, straight before bed is a great time to do their home reading. And if they've had a long day at school and then they've been to swimming and then you've done something else, reading before they go to bed is not going to be the most ideal time. So you need to really find a time that works for you as well, but also your child. For some children, this may be first thing in the morning when they wake up. They're fresh, they're ready to read. For others, it may be, half an hour after they get home. It might be before dinner. It might be straight after dinner. But it's really important that you find a time and really set that time aside. It is a really good bonding opportunity with your child as well. So when reading a book, let them look through the book first. Have a look at what they think might happen, or as they're looking through, see if there's any words that they may not be aware of. I know in some of the books they might come across a fig. Some kids may not know what a fig is, so it's a really good opportunity to talk about, oh, this is a fig. As they're reading, really important, we want reading to be a positive experience for them, so it's really important that we do praise them when they sound out a word correctly. If they're incorrect, if they say the wrong sound, if they say the wrong word, really important that you do model how to sound out the word. So spot, and have your child practice with you. Ask them questions about the story. You can do it while they're reading, so this is that sort of day 2. You can ask them while they're reading or after they're reading. Talk about the characters, the story, the pictures. Have a think about making predictions. Oh, what could happen next? If they wrote another one of these stories, what could happen in the next story? Making connections, as I spoke about before. If you've got a dog, oh, how is the dog similar to our dog in the story? And some of the decodable books actually have some comprehension questions in the back that you can use as well. But most importantly, we want it to be exciting. So be excited. I know some of the books are dry and it can seem like it is a bit of a chore to do, but if you sound excited about reading with your child, they will in turn be excited about reading. And that's what we want them to do. We want them to enjoy reading, which is most important. So as Megan mentioned before, we have some little characters that help us. This is one that children are starting to be familiar with, and it's called our blending bunny, and it's really our only strategy when it comes to decoding words and solving those words. And it's just say the sounds and read the word. So we do not teach children to guess. We never encourage it, and it is not something we want you to encourage either. Guessing isn't reading, it's just guessing. If your child is stuck on a sound, just remind them of what that sound is. So don't tell them the entire word. Just say, oh, in this word, that sound is don't give in to them. Don't give in and tell them what the word is. If you keep telling them the word, they're going to expect the word to be told to them. And so we really want them to build those skills of being able to solve words independently, so that they do become an independent reader. And they need to become confident in solving those words. If they are guessing, let them finish the sentence and then just get them to go back and try again. If they've guessed the whole page, all right, that was nice. Let's go back to the beginning and let's actually read what's on the page. Let's say the sounds properly. Let's read these words. So along with the book that they'll get, they receive, and you've paid for these, that they receive a home reading log. And this just helps you to build that consistent routine with your home reading. And it's also about counting the nights of reading. Some classes will do special celebrations for 25 nights and 50 nights of reading. And the kids get a sticker for when they get to those 25 milestones. But we expect at least 5 nights of reading per week. For a child to actually become a proficient reader, at least 5 nights of reading a week is enough to support their reading. So really, all you have to do is just record what the book was. There's a spot for a smiley face that your child can put put a smiley face if they enjoyed the book. There's stickers as well, and there's also that tally to just keep track of how many nights of reading they've been doing. There's also a space down the bottom if you ever need to leave a note for the teacher to say, oh, I know maybe they're struggling with that particular book. So there's space for that. Make sure you fill them out. as it's really important with those routines. So on top of their home reading, so the book they're going to bring home, they're also going to receive a little book that's called their word workbook. And inside this book, there are going to be some lists of words. And there are two types of lists, and it's really important to know the difference between the two. So the first list we have, they're called the breakables. And these are made to practice sounding out words. Practice saying the sounds to read the word. And as you'll see over here, they have some blue dots, and your child can use their finger on the dot to help them say the sound and then read the word. And this is to practice that blending. So it's not about memorizing these words, it's about practicing the sounding out and the blending of them. So that when teachers are testing them, we actually ask the child to say the sounds and read this word. If they come along and go at, it, am, sat, sit, mat, no, that doesn't show us that they've blended. We need them to actually show us that they are blending sounds together. For probably the first few lists, you'll see that there's just some single letters, and this is just us making sure that they're knowing those sounds. As the list progress, they get a little bit harder. There'll be a sentence as well to read. So those are the breakables. Those are the ones that we need to sound out. The other types of words we have are called camera words, and these are our high frequency words that I've mentioned a couple of times. And these are the words that actually have tricky sounds, difficult sounds, complex sounds that your child won't have learnt yet. And these really aren't the ones for sounding out. When we teach them, we expose your child to the actual tricky sound. So, for example, in the word the has two sounds, th and which are both more complex than what we have taught them so far. So we're just exposing them to that and saying, we go the, so that they're putting that together. But when it comes to us practicing and testing those words, we just want them to read them. It's really important with those words that we don't just learn them in order, because children are very good at learning an order of words, but they may not be able to then translate that knowledge into a text. So it's really important that when we do practice them, that we practice them out of order. When teachers test words, we will test them out of order as well. So, and that really shows that your child knows the words. We do try to test as often as we can, but obviously in large classes of children, sometimes we may not be able to get them tested as soon as possible. So we do endeavour to try and test them at least once a week, but if not, it may be once a fortnight. So if you do tell us, oh, they know all of their ant words now, can you please test them? We'll try our best to test them, but yeah, it may not happen. Things happen during the day. So just, please understand that we may not be able to test them every single day. And if they don't quite know them, we're going to give them some time before we test them again. We're not going to come back the next day and go, all right, let's see if you know them now. We really want them to know them. Anything you wanted to add, Megan?
Some of the parents that I've had in the past, and I've done this also, I will write the sound above, like in the, so above the E. Sometimes I'll write a U, so that just prompts the child of what the sound is in that word, and that seems to really help if children are really struggling to read the word. The high frequency word is to write this, like in was, I put an O and a Z over A and the S. That helps.
And there's lots of other things you can do with those camera words as well. You can write them onto little cards and create memory games. Also there's lots of things you can do. You can make them, build them out of Lego. I know I've had parents before who write them on cards and then go and hide them around the house, and their child has to go and find them and read them to them. I know I've had parents stick them to the back of the toilet door. Can be a great spot to put them, that they can practice their words while they're there. So yeah, there's lots of things you can do to practice those words, but really important that we're practicing both lists so that they'll progress through.
All right, so as they go up through the year levels, writing is just as complex as reading. Often writing comes a little bit later after reading, so they'll get really good at reading, and you may not see some development in their writing, but eventually the writing comes. So usually they be able to speak it, so the oral language, and then they able to read it, and then writing, because it's an even more complex skill than reading. So now they've got to be able to put it onto the paper. So in foundation, they heavily focus on sentence, a simple sentence, and being able to write 1 or 2 sentences by the end of the year independently. So to achieve foundation level, that is to be able to produce at least 2 sentences independently. So they talk a lot about verbs and doing words, who's in the sentence, like what did they do, and that is pretty much what they focus on all year long. We don't really teach them a text type in foundation. We just encourage them to write about what they can see and what they can do, and then later on they talk about the recount, but we really heavily just want them to work on just being able to produce a sentence independently. So by the end of foundation, we don't expect huge amounts of writing. We just really want them to be confident to have a go at writing any sentence by themselves. And we introduce them to words like verbs, nouns, adjectives, and we teach those words so they understand what they mean. Another huge focus in foundation is handwriting. So they do a lot of handwriting so that they can form the letters correctly. There's lots of evidence that handwriting has a huge link to phonics progression, to understanding the sounds. So we do a lot of handwriting in the classes, and Scott will explain we do it a certain way. Scott?
Yeah, so when we're teaching children to write, we teach them, you'll probably hear them talking about things like tall stick, tunnel, fishing hook, open ball. We teach them a whole lot of shapes that are then used to create letters. And it's really important that we do teach them the correct way. So if at home, if your child is doing some writing and you see the way that they might be forming a letter and it may not be the right way, it's really important that we do correct them and that we show them the right way and then get them to practice. Sometimes even holding their hand, to just move their hand in that direction can be a great way. At Botanic Ridge, so some other schools use the Victorian cursive. We actually chose to use South Australian font. It's much easier. It's got a nice closed B, closed P, much easier to form as well. There's no crazy Zs. But really important that they do learn those correct formations. There's a lot of research about how children, when they're learning to write, if they learn to write a letter the correct way, they only need to practice it so many times before it becomes sort of muscle memory. If they are in a bad habit, so if they're, say, forming their O from the bottom and going around, if they're in that habit, they actually need to practice it. I think it's something like 1,400 times the correct way to actually break that habit. So it's really important that, if they're writing their name and you watch them, if they're doing a letter the wrong way, fix them. We're at the moment in foundation, we're talking a lot about pencil grip and holding a pencil properly. Actually, our first writing learning task for this term is about the way they write their name and their pencil grip as well, and we'll be looking carefully at how your child is holding it. We're teaching a 3-finger grip. It is okay if they are using a 4th finger for the moment, but it is something that once they build up enough strength in their hand, we can then lose that 4th finger to then only hold with 3. So if they are doing anything crazy with 5 fingers, we're just trying to encourage 3 on the pencil. And we do a lot of activities at school where we're working on those muscles in their hand. Colouring is a great activity that you can do at home to support with building that grip. Things like hanging up the washing, so with pegs and things like that. Lots of things where they're actually moving their hands like this builds that strength so that when they're writing, they actually don't fatigue and get too tired to write anymore. We really want nice, strong hands. So spelling. So this is one that usually comes up. And I just want to talk about just how you can support your child if they are eager to write at home. you know, want to start to learn how to spell things. Really important that actually telling a child how to spell everything, every single word, isn't actually going to help them to become an independent writer. So instead, what we want to encourage is we want to encourage them to have a go. So ask questions such as, oh, what sounds can you hear in the word? What sound do you think, what sound can you hear first? What sound can you hear at the end? Or what are some other sounds we can hear in the words? And as children develop their writing skills, it's okay that they're not spelling everything perfectly. It's okay if they might be missing out sounds here and there, particularly if they're trying to write longer words. We just want them to have a go. One of the things that a lot of foundation children struggle with is just that confidence to actually have a go and try something without being afraid to make a mistake. So really important that you do talk to them about, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes we miss sound, sometimes we write it the wrong way. It's okay. So when it comes to a word that can be decodable, so we really encourage them just to say the sounds and to write the sounds that they hear. If they write a C instead of a K, we just alert them to, oh, you know, in this word, we write this word with a K instead of a C. Words with tricky sounds, though, you may like to clue them into the tricky part. So rather than spelling the entire word for them, because there are going to be sounds in there that they will eventually know, but it might just be cluing them into that part of the word. So I know if they're trying to write the word shout and they get stuck on the ow sound, you might say, oh, in that word we spell ow as an OU. Or, you know, in this word we spell the A sound with an AY. So you can clue them into that tricky part of the word to help them out. It's really important that when we're practicing those high frequency words, the camera words, that we do actually also start to expose them to how to spell those words. And so any of those camera words, you'll find they have at least one complex sound in them. And this is the part that the child just has to learn. Every other part of it, they should be able to work out. But here are just a few little steps that you can go through. So the first is actually break it up. So segment the word into its sound. So for example, the word day, d-a. Then it says to map the word. So sort of breaking it apart. So d and a. And then identify the tricky part. So in the word day, the tricky part that a child may not understand yet because they just haven't learnt that in phonics would be the AY. So there's a lot of research that says, a lot of cognitive research that highlights that importance of actually making connections to other things, to previously learnt concepts. So there might be some other words that your child may know that have this AY in it. So words like say, may, way, play, away. So alerting them to go, oh, look, in day, the AY is at the end. It's also in the word say. So if you know how to spell day, you'll now know how to spell say and may. Words like he, me, we, all of those words, they have that similar sound. So picking up that and trying to look at those commonalities between certain words, and then just ask the child to say the sounds as they write it. D, a, as they write them. So at Botanic Ridge, we have 2 online learning programs that we use. The first one is probably the one that foundation children will use the most, and that is Nessie. So it's a computer-based structured phonics program, and it looks at being able to read as well as being able to spell. So it's working on the same things that we're working at school. It has some materials, some visual aids, videos, games. The kids really, really enjoy being on Nessie. One thing I will mention, it is actually a program for children with dyslexia, but because it matches so well with our phonics program, we thought every child can benefit from it. So this is one that we use. The second one that we have is called Whooshka, and Whooshka is just basically a digital library of books, and they are leveled books. So they may not be the decodable ones. So for foundation and probably year 1, They're not really the books that we recommend that your child is reading, but this is a good opportunity to practice the comprehension. They have some quizzes. There are some decodable books, but I'm not quite sure if we have the access to them or not. So we have two digital platforms. You'll receive their passwords for those that you can then work on at home. Whooshka's a great one if you've exhausted your library at home, to go and have a look and see what's on there. Is there anything you wanted to add about that, Megan?
No, in the Whooshka they can be they're read to, so they just press play and the story is read to them. So that's much easier for them to just focus on the comprehension. A lot of our parents in the past have completed this online training for free if they were really wanting extra information and they weren't sure how to help them at home, or their child was struggling to really remember how the different sounds and blending and different skills like that. They've actually completed this course online, and we'll post this on Seesaw so that you can just click the link, and so you can do that if that's something that you would like. But yeah, the parents' feedback is quite helpful. We do encourage parent helpers, and so from next term you'll see on Compass and on Seesaw when we have our sessions. So we go through how you can help at school, and you'll need a working with children's check as well to be a parent helper. Sometimes you can be a parent helper in the office, you can be a parent helper in any other year level. Then they're all wanting parent helpers. We've had people do reading, we've had people do contacting, helping with book club. Yes, yes, and Lisa, you also, because you're on site in a school, you will need to be a proof of vaccination as well now. But yeah, we really do encourage people to come into our school. From term 2, as I said, we will let you know if that's something that you want. You can come in and we'll do an information session just so that you're aware of what you can do and how to help.
All right, so just a couple of questions that we usually get, and then we'll open it up if there's any other questions that might be in the chat. So the first one is, what do I do if my child doesn't know the word? It really depends what the word is. If it is a word that is decodable, that they could sound out with the knowledge that they would have, in those circumstances, it's just about asking them to say the sounds, to put the sounds together. You might at first need to help them with that initial stretching out of sounds. So if they're trying to read the word cat, you might go at and then stretch it out, cat, until they can then do it a little bit quicker, cat, cat, until they're saying it. So you might need to initially help them as children start to learn blending, but after the fact, then they should be right. If it is a high frequency word, so a camera word, you may just need to tell them or clue them into the tricky part in the word. Another question we get asked is, my child has read this book before, what do I do? There is nothing wrong with the child reading a book again, and in some cases, some children will want to try and bring the same book home, and they will know it off by heart very soon. So if they have read the book before, it's okay if they read it again. If they are bringing the same book home, though, it might be worth just a little note to the teacher just to say, oh, can you please make sure that they don't take this one home, or that they choose a different one. This book is too hard or too easy. So if it is too hard, in those circumstances, this is where you might need to help them just a little bit more. They may need some help with the blending of sounds. They may need some help with the camera words. If it is too hard, then that's an opportunity where you can go, all right, well, let's practice our breakables. Let's practice our camera words a little bit more. If you are finding that they are, if reading is becoming a bit of a nightmare for you at home, some days it might just be worth just to close the book, maybe just practice the camera words and the breakables for that night. That's totally acceptable, so long as they've still practiced something. If the book is too easy, that's okay as well. We do actually send books that are easy home. This is so that they do get that repeated practice. It's so that they can work on their comprehension. So if they are too easy, that's okay as well. Teachers will try and monitor where your child's reading is, so that if it is very, very easy, we'll try and move them up to an appropriate level. But please don't expect them to get a book that is going to require a lot of work. They should actually be easy. Another one we get is it okay if I read to my child first? To begin with, that's okay. We do want the child to actually practice blending sounds and reading words. So we do really want them to do some practice. So it may be that you might need to read, one page to them and then they read the next page. You might need to read a little bit more and then give them a go. But we really want to build them to reading the entire book on their own. If it is a book from your library, great time to read to them. My child can read the words but can't answer the questions about the text. That's just an opportunity where we do need to focus a little bit more on understanding, asking lots of questions, particularly when we talk about being able to summarize a text. So if you get to the end of the book and you ask your child, oh, well, what happened? And if they can't tell you anything, getting them to actually use the pages, use the pictures to help them, to prompt them along, or even just doing a page at a time. So read one page, then talk about what happened on the page. And then you can slowly build up from there. All right, now we're going to read 2 pages. Now let's talk about what happened on those pages. So those are just a few questions that we've had. I'm not sure if there's any other questions that we've got. No. Any dying questions? I guess obviously throughout the year you might come across a difficulty at home, or you might find something that's going on. The best point of call is to always go and speak to your child's teacher first. They'll be able to offer you some strategies, some support. They may have even seen something similar happen in the classroom with your child. So really good chance to go and talk to your child's teacher if you do have any more questions about how to support them at home.
No, we're all quiet on the questions and the chat's very quiet. It must be the fabulous presentation. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Scott. As we said earlier, we will make the presentation available on our YouTube channel. And Megan mentioned before that she'll also post that link to the extra online PD if parents would like to take up that opportunity. So just to say thank you very much for joining us this evening. We really enjoyed having you here, and thank you very much to Scott and Megan for their time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
See ya.